In the beautiful and park name of Allah, who is the most gracious, the sustainer, and the most merciful. Assalamu alaikum students. I am Hira Jamil, the instructor of the subject Morphology and Syntax Basic from the University of Education Digi Khan campus. And the course code is ENGL2119. In this lecture, our topic of concern is X-bar theory, and I will try my best to define and elaborate it and in an easy way, so that you people may get the clear concepts and idea about this theory. So students, let's start our lecture. So as we are discussing X-bar theory, well, the name sounds bizarre, I think. I know you people are just curious about to know what is this X-bar theory and what it is doing with linguistics, right? So X-bar theory was first proposed by Noam Chomsky in 1970s, and it was further developed by Ray Jekindorf in 1977. So basically, X-bar theory was incorporated into both the transformational and the non-transformational theories of syntax. So in linguistics, X-bar theory is a theory of syntactic category formation. So it's all about the reasoning, a structural representation, and the complex relationships between the various grammatical categories in a sentence. The complex relationships means complex links and associations between the several modes in a phrase, clause, or a sentence. So collectively we can say that it is a proper and precise representation of the relations between each word of a phrase, clause, or a sentence. So it is an approach to understand the grouping of the words into phrases, clauses, or sentences. Now we have the basic concept about this theory. There are two independent claims. It embodies two independent claims. One is that phrases may contain intermediate constituents projected from a head X, and the second one is this system of the projected constituency may be common to more than one category, and that category may be noun, verb, adverb, or adjective, preposition. So here you can see the head X. Here the letter X is basically used to signify an arbitrary lexical category, means they may be the part of the speech, right? So when analyzing a specific utterance, specific categories are assigned. Thus the X may become an N for noun, a V for verb, and an A for adjective, or it may a P for preposition. Simple. So the term X bar is derived from the notation represented this structure. So certain structures are represented by X, means an X bar over it, a little bar. So the notation XP stands for X phrase and is at the equivalent level of x bar bar means it is usually read aloud as x double bar. So x bar theory is, we may say that, regarded as a substantive theory of ray structure properties in natural languages. So there are stated two independent claims, as I have told you, and there are 6 conditions, or we may say that constituent principles of the x bar theory, x bar system, so which requires all phrasal categories to be projections of the lexical categories, because lexicality is the primary defining property of the x bar systems. Here is the first constituent principle, lexicality. It is the primary defining property of the x bar system, which requires all phrasal categories to be projections of the lexical categories. So a primitive set of preterminals is assumed. Lexicality means that the complete category inventory is assumed by these two sets. The first set is the set of preterminals categories like noun or verb, and the B, or the second set may be a set of projections of these, such as various kinds of noun phrases or verb phrases. The second one is succession. It is referred to as the principled class of exception, right? So the third one is uniformity. As the name indicates itself, that all maximal projections have the same bar level, means that the maximal bar level is the same for every preterminal. The next one is maximality. It means all non-heads are maximal projections. This next one is the centrality. You know, the start symbol is a maximal projection, the very start symbol. The usual definition of a grammar demands that a single designated symbol may be admissible at the start symbol in derivation. So maximality basically covers constituents which are introduced in right hand sides of the rules, and thus it says nothing about the start symbol. So centrality requires the start symbol must be the maximal projection of some preterminals. The last one is optionality. Now optionality means all and only non-heads are the optional. So in initiative terms, optionality is the condition that non-heads are only optionally present. Next we have the core concepts. Here we have 3 syntax assembly rules which form the basis of the X bar theory. These rules can be expressed in English as the immediate dominance rules for natural languages. They are also useful, for example, for programmers in the field of natural language processing, or visually as the parse trees. As you can see, they are looking like parse trees. So all three representations are presented in this slide. The first one is an X phrase consists of an optional specifier and an X bar in any order. Second one is one kind of X bar consists of an X bar and adjunct in either order, right? The third one is another kind of X bar consists of an X, the head of the phrase, and any number of complements, possibly they may be zero, in any order. So we have a question that how these three rules combine. Now in this slide, the following diagram illustrates one way the rules might be combined to form a generic XP structure. Because the rules are recursive, there is an infinite number of possible structures that could be generated, including smaller trees that omit optional parts and the structures with multiple complements, and as well as the additional layers of XPs and X's of various types. Because all of the rules allow combination in any order, the left-right position of the branches at any point may be reversed from what is shown in the example or in the sentence, or what is given in a sentence. However, in any given language, usually only one-handedness of each rule is observed. So the example maps naturally onto the left to right phrase order that is usually used in English. So here note that a complement containing X bar may be distinguished from an adjunct containing X bar by the fact that the complement has an X, which is the head, and as a sibling, whereas an adjunct has X bar as a sibling. So here we are three basic terms that are used in this X bar theory, which are specifiers, complements, and adjuncts. They are very simple. Specifier is a particular part of a phrase which serves the function of modifying, or we may say specifying, another part of the phrase. For instance, they include articles, possessive determiners, demonstrative determiners, or the quantifiers. The second term is complements, and the third is adjunct. Adjuncts and complements are the two main elements in a sentence. However, there is a major difference between these two elements. Complements are the words or the phrases that are used to complete the meaning of a given sentence, whereas adjuncts are just parts of the sentences that contain extra information about the sentence. So they are not necessary to complete the meaning of a sentence. So the main difference between adjunct and complement is that adjunct is optional to a sentence and complements are necessary part of a sentence. So complements may be direct object, indirect object, complement of adjectives, complement of adverbs, and the adjuncts modifiers include adjectives, adverbs, prepositional phrases, where. Next we have the X bar rules. We have three X bar rules: the specifier rule, adjunct rule, and the complement rule, where X can stand for any category, which may be noun, verb, adjective, adverb, and preposition. So X must be consistent through these three rules. So we can also say that bar and phrase level constituents are the projections of the head. In the next slide, there is X bar structure for these X bar rules. Here you can see we have X bar structure. So in this structure, X bar theory distinguishes two further levels of projections: complements combined with X to form X bar projections, and adjuncts combined with X bar to form X bar projections. Specifier combines with the topmost X bar to form the maximal projection XP. Here is the visual representation of the X bar schema, as you can see in the slide. So a specifier is the sister node to X bar, and together they form XP. The complement YP is also a sister to the head X, and the adjunct, which we can say the ZP, can combine with only an X bar to form X bar again. So the bars can also be understood as a projection of the properties of X. So X bars are all the intermediate projections of X. So there can be several intermediate projections of X in the form of X bar. So this structure helps to accommodate several complements of X, such as double object constructions, which must take two objects. This X bar schema allows formulation of several levels of the complex relationships between any category and the lexical items contained in it. It avoids redundancy by echoing the name and features of the lexical item to the top of the phrase, unlike PS rules. So it is an endocentric approach. In next slide I will further explain the endocentric approach. So it improves representational adequacy for all the constituents by allotting a head to a phrase and representing it at the maximal level. Next we have endocentric structures. Endocentricity meaning that every phrase has a head. The only obligatory element in a phrase is the head. When the X bar schema was introduced and generally adopted into the generative grammar in the 1970s, it was replacing a view of syntax that allowed for exocentric structures with one that views all sentence structures as endocentric. So in other words, all the phrasal units necessarily have a head in the X bar schema. Unlike the traditional binary division of the sentence S into a subject, noun phrase, NP, and a predicate verb phrase, which was an exocentric division. So, in this regard, the X bar schema was taking generative grammar one step towards a dependency based theory of the syntax. I think you people may have a question that from where the X bar term was developed. So the phrase structure rules were developed to represent noun phrase, verb phrase, adverb, adjective phrase, and so on. But there was nothing to represent the property of a noun phrase representing whether the noun phrase or the determiner or even an adjective modifying it so should be somehow related to the verb in a where the relation of semantic rules as well as case has to be built between the verb and one of the categories in the noun phrase. An amount of branching was also not controlled as addition of adverbs, multiple genitive constructions. An amount of branching was also not controlled. So several amounts of branching from the topmost phrase at the sentence level representation is the PS rule. So PS rules also implied that one needs to create different rules each for each type of phrase such as noun phrase, verb phrase, prepositional phrase, and so on, as the representation did not distinguish between an integral category in the phrase and the other obligatory or optional categories inside it. So this was exocentric in nature. So we can say that the representation of the lexical properties of a word at a phrasal level is endocentric in nature in the X bar. So these properties are very strategically represented at a compositional level which is higher than the level of its entry in the structure of the phrasal level. So all phrases are conceptually headed by one head X. The head of the projection is a zero projection. Heads are the terminal nodes and they dominate words. Next we have a simple noun phrase. The word the is a determiner, specifically an article, which at first was believed to be a type of specifier for nouns. The head is the determiner D, which projects into a determiner phrase DP. In this example, the word cat is the noun phrase NP, which acts as the complement of the determiner phrase. So more recently it has been suggested that D is the head of the noun phrase. Now here note that branches with empty specifiers, adjuncts, complements, and heads are often omitted. to reduce visual clutter. So the determiner phrase and the noun phrase above have no adjuncts or complements. So they end up being very linear. In English, specifiers precede the X bar that contains the head. Thus, determiners always precede their nouns if they are in the same noun phrase. Same other languages use different word order. This was a simple noun phrase and it's a simple parse tree representation. Next we have an example for this X bar theory, and we have an X bar parse tree which is very clear and a large tree. So phrase structure, what can we say about the structure of the following sentence? For instance, Tom chased Jerry. Second sentence, the cat chased the mouse. The third sentence is the cat slept. Sentences basically are not just the strings of words. They have hierarchical constituent structures, right? That is, words are grouped into phrases which in turn can be grouped into even larger phrases. The most convenient ways to visualize these are the tree diagrams and the labeled brackets. So the two are completely equivalent. So we can draw a tree if and only if we can create corresponding labeled bracketing. So to describe the configuration of two elements, we use the following terms: the root, leaves, dominates, mother or daughter of, or the sister of. Collectively we may say that the siblings. So how do these apply to the tree on the left? Means A, B, C, D, E. This bracketing describes a structure identical to the one on the left. Means A, B, start bracket, and then again bracket, C, D, E, bracket close. So the phrase structure rules for the sentences, we have important restrictions on PS trees. One is every node except the root. Remember, except the root. Every node has one mother. The second one is two branches can never cross each other. To see why these rules are true, or try to come up with PS rules describing the two structures. The first, A, more restricted phrase structure generalize the form of PS rules by using category variables. This way we only have to use three rules. Remember that it is not necessary for a phrase to have specifiers or complements. Only the head is always obligatory, right? So why these structural relationships are important in this X bar trees or X bar theory? Structural representation of the complex relationships between the various grammatical categories in a language that combine in a sequence to form a phrase, clause, or a sentence has been developing since the transformational generative grammar that is popularly known as TGG, as a part of the mainstream generative grammar. But a proper and precise relational representation was presented in Chomsky's work to highlight and clarify at same symbolic representation the complex links between each words of a sentence existing indirectly. Next we have conclusion. Now I am forwarding towards the conclusion of X bar theory. For your convenience, I am recalling the whole topic with the main points. So students, in this lecture I have discussed the X bar theory with its main core concepts along with the example. So basically this theory attempts to identify syntactic features common to all human languages. So it's a method of sentence analysis that divides the sentence in different constituents, but it states some very specific rules. And X-bar theory provides us with an avenue for exploring the differences and similarities among languages. So X-bar theory is a component of linguistic theory which attempts to identify syntactic features presumably common to all those human languages that fit in a presupposed framework. So it claims that among their phrasal categories, all those languages share certain structural similarities, including one known as the X bar, which does not appear in traditional phrase structure rules for English or other natural languages, means the PS rules. So X-bar theory was first proposed by Noam Chomsky and it was further developed by Ray Jekindorf in 1977. An X-bar theoretic understanding of sentence structure is possible in a constituency-based grammar only. It is not possible in a dependency-based grammar, means PS rule grammar rules. So the letter X is used to signify an arbitrary lexical category. When analyzing a specific utterance, specific categories are assigned. So the term X bar may become an N for noun, a V for verb, and an A for adjective or a P for the preposition. So the term X bar is derived from the notation representing this structure. Certain structures are represented by X. So in addition, the implementation of X bar theory also allows proper solutions for a lot of computational needs that demands the representation of the structural complexity of a human language for the purpose of dealing with natural language processing. So in X bar theory, the X bar format allows us to bring out the commonality between the different types of phrases. So the traditional phrase structure rules for specific phrase, for example verb phrase and so on, are reduced to more elementary notions. The hierarchical organization of the phrase is captured by X bar theory. And the X bar schema can be extended to the clausal constituents. As I have mentioned earlier, that sentences are not just the strings of words, right? They have hierarchical constituent structures, which are the words which are grouped into phrases, which in turn can be grouped into even more larger phrases. Another thing we have discussed about the expert schema, that it allows formulation of several levels of the complex relationships between any category and the lexical item contained in it. So it avoids redundancy by queuing the name and features of the lexical item to the top of the phrase, unlike the PS rules, which are the dependency rules. So another point was it is an endocentric approach. Means, in other words, all phrasal units necessarily have a head. So in the X bar schema, unlike the traditional binary division of the sentences, which was an exocentric division. So in this regard, the X bar schema was taking generative grammar one step toward a dependency based theory of the syntax. Next point was it improves representational adequacy for all the constituents by allotting a head to a phrase and representing it at the maximal level. So this improves representational adequacy for all the constituents and allowing for the appropriate accommodation of all kinds of complex relationships between between each constituents of a phrase, clause, or a sentence. Another point was expert theory distinguishes two further levels of projections, right? Complements, adjuncts, and specifiers. So complements combined with X to form X projections, adjuncts combined with X bar to form X bar projections, and the specifiers combines with the topmost X bar to form the maximal projections. And we also have the visual representation of X bar schema in the previous slide. Next point was specifier, complements, and adjuncts. Specifier is a particular part of a phrase which serves the function of modifying or specifying another part of the phrase. Adjuncts and complements are two main elements in a sentence. There is a major difference between these two elements. Complements are words or phrases that are used to complete the meaning of a given sentence, whereas adjuncts are just parts of the sentences that contain the extra information about the sentence. Means what kind of message is being delivered. So they are not necessary to complete the meaning of a sentence. So the main difference between adjunct and complement is that adjunct is optional to a sentence, whereas complements are a necessary part of a sentence. Right? So all the points I am concluding in just 2 to 3 lines, that it's all about resolving a structural representation and the complex relationships between various grammatical categories in a sentence, clause, or phrase. So, complex relationships means the complex links and associations between several modes in a phrase, clause, or a sentence. So, collectively, we can say that it is a proper and precise representation of the relations between each word of a phrase, clause, or sentence. So, it is an approach to understand the grouping of words into phrases, clauses, or sentences. This was all about the X bar theory, the X bar schema, the rules, the basic concepts, the core concepts. That's all. So, students, I hope this lecture will be very helpful for you people to understand the concepts clearly and in a better way. So, thank you so much. Stay safe at your homes. Stay blessed. Take care of all of you and your families. Stay blessed. Allah Hafiz.